You've just stepped into the Motivation Library, a place where struggles turn into stories of strength and dreams transform into destinies. Every book is a path, every chapter a step forward. Today, we walk a new path. Let's begin. Preface: Fuel your fire. There comes a time in every life when the flame starts to fade, when the dreams that once burned bright turn to glowing embers, when even the strongest hearts begin to whisper, "Maybe I'm tired." This book was born in one of those moments. Not in the light, but in the dark. Not in triumph, but in exhaustion. Because that's where the real journey begins. Not when you're soaring, but when you've fallen to your knees and you're searching for the smallest spark inside yourself that still believes. Fuel Your Fire is not a book about motivation for the good days. It's a guide for the days when you can't even get out of bed. It's for the nights when the weight of your dreams feels heavier than your strength. It's for the ones who have been burned by life, by people, by failure, and are still willing to try again. This book isn't about keeping your fire alive. It's about remembering you were the fire all along. You'll walk through pain, fear, and failure in these pages. You'll meet people, real and raw, who lost everything and still dared to rise. You'll see how the human spirit can bend without breaking, how courage can be quiet yet fierce, and how hope can be rebuilt from ashes. This isn't about perfection. It's about persistence. It's about showing up for yourself, even when the world forgets your name. Because fire doesn't care about applause, it just burns. And when it burns with purpose, it lights the way for everyone around it. Why fuel your fire? Because life will always try to dim you. You'll face seasons when your energy wanes, when your passion flickers, when doubt whispers that maybe your time has passed. But here's the truth. You were never meant to be a flicker. You were born to be a blaze. And the secret isn't in waiting for someone to light you up. It's in learning how to fuel yourself. Your fire grows every time you push through fear. It grows when you turn pain into power. It grows when you refuse to give up, even when your heart says you should. That's the essence of this book, to remind you that the flame inside you is not fragile. It's eternal. For the fighters, the dreamers, the burned, and the rebuilders. This book is for the ones who kept going long after the world stopped clapping. For the single parent working 2 jobs and still daring to dream. For the artist painting with shaking hands. For the student rewriting their story 1 page at a time. For the broken hearts learning how to love again. This is for the ones who've been told they're too much, too emotional, too passionate, too stubborn. Because in truth, that too much is exactly what the world needs. The fire in you is not a flaw. It's your greatest gift. How to read this book. You don't have to read Fuel Your Fire all at once. Take it chapter by chapter, moment by moment. Each section is a spark, a reminder that strength isn't always loud. Some days you'll see yourself in the pain. Other days you'll see yourself in the rising. But every page is written to remind you of one truth. You are stronger than you've ever been told. If you're lost, start at chapter 1, when the fire fades. If you're healing, go to turning pain into power. If you're rebuilding, find yourself in the courage to begin again. And if you're ready to rise, in with you are the fire. This book is not just a collection of stories. It's a mirror. Every page reflects the unstoppable force you already are. From my heart to yours. I wrote these words not as someone who has it all figured out, but as someone who has stood in the ashes more than once and found a way to rise again. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. You don't need perfect circumstances to start again. You just need one spark of belief. So as you read this book, I hope you don't just find motivation. I hope you ignite something deeper, something unshakable, something alive. Because the world doesn't need more noise. It needs more fire, more hearts that burn with purpose, more souls that refuse to dim, more people like you. You don't have to wait for the light. You are the light. Now, take a deep breath. Turn the page. And let's fuel your fire. Chapter 1. When the fire fades. There comes a time in every person's life when the spark that once burned bright begins to dim. It doesn't happen suddenly. It fades quietly, like the last ember in a campfire, glowing faintly beneath the ashes of exhaustion, disappointment, and routine. At first, you don't notice it. You keep going through the motions, repeating the same steps you once took with energy and confidence. You still smile at people, still post that motivational quote, still tell yourself that you're fine. But deep inside, something feels off. The excitement that used to wake you up early and keep you up late has been replaced by silence. Heavy, invisible, and unexplainable. You wonder where it went. That unstoppable version of you who used to dream, who used to fight, who used to believe. And the truth is, it didn't vanish overnight. It burned out slowly, quietly, while you were busy trying to keep up with life. The silent burnout. Most people don't crash because of one failure. They fade because of 1,000 tiny disappointments. The project that didn't work out. The relationship that drained more than it gave. The effort no one noticed. The years that passed too quickly. You tell yourself you'll bounce back after a break. You promise you'll get your motivation back when things calm down. But days turn into weeks. Weeks turn into months. And the fire that once roared inside you becomes a memory. We live in a world obsessed with success stories, but few talk about the silent seasons. The times when even the strongest feel lost. The moments when motivation videos don't work, when affirmations sound empty, when every step feels like dragging your feet through mud. No one teaches you how to handle that. How to keep walking when your passion turns to ashes. The man who forgot his fire. There was a man named Adam. In his 20s, he was unstoppable, building his dream company from scratch, working day and night, fueled by nothing but ambition and caffeine. People admired him. He's going places, they said. He's built different. But behind the success stories and late-night grind was something else. Pressure, loneliness, and quiet fear. Every achievement demanded a bigger one. Every win came with new expectations. Years later, when the company finally stabilized and the money started flowing, Adam woke up one morning and felt nothing. He didn't want to check emails. Didn't care about meetings. Didn't feel joy in what once thrilled him. The fire that once fueled his every move had burned out, not from failure, but from constant, endless striving. He sat in his car one day, hands on the steering wheel, staring at nothing. And for the first time in years, he whispered to himself, "I don't even know who I am without the chase." That's the dangerous thing about burnout. It doesn't announce itself. It disguises as tiredness. I'll rest later, just one more goal. But what it really means is, you've lost connection to your why. When passion becomes pressure, you started because you loved it. You stayed because you had to prove something. And somewhere along the way, passion became pressure. Many dreamers experience this quiet shift. A musician stops making music for the joy of sound and starts chasing streams. A writer stops writing for the soul and starts counting likes. A student stops learning for curiosity and starts competing for approval. It's the most painful transformation, when what once set you free begins to chain you down. The truth is, even fire needs air to breathe. If you suffocate it with expectation, comparison, and perfection, it dies, no matter how strong it once was. The woman who started over. There's another story about a woman named Laila. She was a painter, known in her city for her stunning, emotional artwork. But one day, after a year of personal loss and exhaustion, she stopped painting completely. Her brushes collected dust. Her canvases leaned silently against the wall. Every time she tried to paint, her hand froze. It wasn't that she forgot how. It was that she forgot why. People around her said, "Maybe it's over. Maybe your time has passed." But she didn't believe that. Somewhere deep inside, she knew her fire wasn't gone, it was buried. One night, after months of silence, she sat in front of her canvas again. But instead of painting beauty, she painted her pain, her loneliness, her fear. When she finished, she looked at the chaotic mess of colors and tears and said softly, "This is me, broken, but still creating." That painting became her most loved piece. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. Sometimes your fire doesn't need to burn brighter. It just needs permission to be honest. When the fire fades, you find yourself. There's something powerful that happens when your motivation dies. You meet the real you, not the one chasing applause, not the one wearing strength as armor, but the one sitting in the ashes, learning how to breathe again. That's when you realize, fire, you were never defined by your success. Fire, you were never weak for slowing down. Fire, you were never lost. You were just being relit. The fading of your fire isn't the end. It's a sacred pause. It's life's way of saying, you've been burning for everything else, now burn for yourself. The psychology of renewal. In psychology, there's a concept called motivational fatigue. It's what happens when constant striving, pressure, and overexposure to always be improving drains the brain's reward systems. You stop feeling excited, not because you failed, but because your mind is tired of chasing dopamine highs that never last. The solution isn't more grind. It's reconnection. Reconnection to purpose, to values, to meaning, to joy. Think about this. When was the last time you did something purely for the love of it? Not for money, not for recognition, not for validation. That's where your fire hides. You don't need to reignite everything, just one spark. Sometimes people try to fix burnout by restarting their whole lives, quitting jobs, changing paths, deleting everything. But the truth is, you don't need to rebuild the entire fire. You just need one spark. That spark could be a walk at sunrise, a forgotten hobby, a meaningful conversation, a quiet moment of honesty with yourself. Once that spark appears, protect it like your life depends on it, because it does. One spark is enough to set a forest ablaze again. The comeback always starts in the quiet. There's a myth that comebacks are loud, filled with dramatic changes and grand moments. But real rebirth begins in silence, in the small decision to keep going, in the unseen nights when you choose to believe again. No one claps for those moments. No one posts about them, but they matter more than any success story ever will. The truth is, when the fire fades, you discover what truly fuels you. Not applause, not validation, but something far deeper, your soul's hunger to live a meaningful life. A final thought. If your fire feels dim right now, don't panic. Don't hate yourself for feeling lost. Don't rush to fix it. Instead, sit with it. Look into the ashes of your heart and listen. Because beneath the quiet, beneath the exhaustion, there's still a heartbeat, steady, waiting, ready. Your fire isn't gone. It's resting, waiting for the moment you'll stop running long enough to remember who you are. And when that moment comes, when the spark returns, when your soul whispers, "Let's rise again," that's when you'll realize, the fire never left you. It was always there, waiting to burn again. Chapter 2. The Spark of Why. There's a question that can rebuild a life. It isn't what do you want? It's why do you want it? Most people move through life chasing what they think they want: success, love, freedom, money, validation, without ever stopping to ask why. They collect achievements like souvenirs, but inside, they still feel empty. Because purpose isn't found in what you do. It's ignited by why you do it. The day the dream felt hollow. A young athlete once trained for years to reach the national stage. He woke before dawn, lifted weights, ran sprints, and sacrificed every social life for the dream of standing under bright stadium lights. Finally, he made it. His name was on the scoreboard. His family cheered from the stands. Cameras flashed. But when the game ended, and the roar faded, he felt nothing. That emptiness scared him more than any defeat ever could. He realized he'd chased the dream not because he loved the sport, but because he loved the idea of being seen. He wanted approval more than purpose. And once he got it, the spark that pushed him there died instantly. That's what happens when we forget the why. A dream without a reason burns out faster than it begins. Why is the oxygen of passion? Purpose is not a slogan. It's oxygen. Without it, even the brightest fire suffocates. When you know your why, ordinary tasks become sacred. Pain feels meaningful. Failure becomes a lesson, not a label. You stop asking, "How much longer do I have to do this?" and start whispering, "How far can I go?" The why is what keeps you alive on the days when logic says to quit. The psychology of why. Psychologists call it intrinsic motivation, the internal drive powered by personal meaning rather than external reward. Studies show that people motivated by why, by purpose, outperform, outlast, and outgrow those driven by praise or fear. Because external motivation fades, internal purpose endures. Think of two runners. One runs because he loves the way the wind feels against his skin. The other runs to post his time online for validation. The first will run for years. The second will stop the moment no one's watching. That's the difference between being fueled by passion and being fueled by performance. The danger of borrowed whys. Many people live borrowed lives, chasing goals handed to them by others. A parent's dream, a society's definition of success, a friend's version of happiness. But a borrowed why can't sustain you. It leaks energy because it doesn't belong to your soul. A man can climb a mountain for 20 years and reach the peak, only to realize it was the wrong mountain. The view means nothing if the climb wasn't yours. So before you rush forward, pause. Ask yourself, is this truly my fire, or someone else's idea of success burning inside me? If the answer feels heavy instead of alive, it's time to find your own flame again. How to find your spark again. The first step to rediscovering your why isn't about making big decisions. It's about asking small, honest questions. Questions like, what moments make me feel most alive? When was the last time I lost track of time doing something I loved? What do I want to give to the world, not just take from it? Who am I when no one is watching? Those answers are clues, sparks waiting to catch fire. The forgotten question. If you look back, you'll notice that every child begins life with a strong why. They ask, why is the sky blue? Why do people cry? Why can't I touch the stars? They don't just want answers, they want understanding. They live in wonder. But somewhere along the way, adults stop asking. We trade curiosity for certainty. We stop wondering and start performing. We forget to question why we do the things we do, and so we end up living on autopilot, breathing but not truly alive. When life knocks out your why, there was once a nurse named Erin. For 15 years, she worked tirelessly in a hospital emergency ward. She was brilliant, compassionate, and deeply respected. But during one terrible winter, everything changed. Her hospital faced cuts, her father passed away, and burnout hit her like a wave. One night, after another double shift, she sat in her car in the parking lot, hands trembling, eyes staring at the dim dashboard light. She whispered, I can't do this anymore. But then a memory flickered, a little girl she once treated, who held her hand and said, when I grow up, I want to be a nurse just like you. That was her why. Not the paycheck, not the praise, but the quiet, unseen healing of lives. That single memory, that spark, reminded her that even in exhaustion, her purpose still breathed beneath the ashes. She didn't quit. She rebuilt. A story of a hidden spark. In a small town, there was a bus driver named Cameron. He'd been driving the same route for 20 years. Every day looked the same. Same roads, same stops, same tired faces. He was quiet, polite, invisible to most. But one rainy morning, when the bus broke down, he noticed an elderly woman struggling to carry her groceries home. Without hesitation, he helped her, walking with her all the way to her door, carrying the bags through the rain. The next day, she waited for his bus again, not because she needed to go anywhere, but just to say thank you. Word spread. Soon, passengers began greeting him by name, leaving small notes of gratitude. For the first time in decades, Cameron realized something profound. He wasn't just a bus driver. He was a bridge, connecting people, carrying lives safely through the storms of the city. His job didn't change. His why did. And that changed everything. You don't need a grand mission. Some people think finding your why means discovering a world-changing purpose, like ending poverty or curing disease. But sometimes your purpose is smaller, quieter, and no less sacred. It could be raising your child with love, or creating art that makes one person feel less alone, or simply becoming a better version of yourself than you were yesterday. Purpose doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it's found in the smallest gestures that no one else sees. When you forget, go back to the beginning. When your fire fades and your why feels far away, return to the beginning, to the moment you first fell in love with what you do, before the world complicated it, before expectations suffocated it. Ask yourself, what did this dream mean to me when no one knew my name? That memory is your home. Every time you reconnect with it, your flame gets stronger. Famous sparks that changed everything. J.K. Rowling wrote Harry Potter while broke, rejected, and alone, because her why was storytelling itself. Not money, not fame. She said, I would keep writing even if no one read it. Nelson Mandela endured decades in prison because his why, freedom for his people, was greater than his pain. Nick Vujicic, born without limbs, built a global motivational movement because his why was to prove that life has no limits except the ones we accept. Every great life began with a simple spark, a why strong enough to survive the storm. The fire that lasts. When you live connected to your why, you stop chasing motivation. You become it. You wake up not because you have to, but because you get to. You face challenges not as punishments, but as training. You no longer need the world's approval, because your soul already approves of your mission. That's what true freedom feels like. not the absence of struggle, but the presence of purpose. A final word. If your fire feels dim, go back to your why. It's the compass that never lies. It's the spark that reignites when everything else burns out. You were not born to live half alive, chasing goals you don't care about, climbing ladders that lean against the wrong walls. You were born to burn bright with intention, to live a story that feels like your own heartbeat. So, take a deep breath. Close your eyes. Ask yourself, why did I begin? Somewhere deep inside, the answer still burns, quietly, patiently, waiting for you to listen. And when you do, the fire returns. Because purpose is the spark that never truly dies. Chapter 3. The battle between fear and desire. There's a war that begins inside every human heart. It isn't fought on battlefields. It's fought in silence, between what we want and what we fear. Desire whispers, you're meant for more. Fear hisses, don't even try. And between those two voices, destinies are born or buried. The invisible war. Every dreamer has felt it. That tightness in the chest right before a big leap. That inner debate between what if it works and what if I fail. Fear is ancient. It's the part of your mind built to protect you from danger. But desire, that's divine. It's the voice of your potential calling you forward. Fear says, stay safe. Desire says, stay true. And life, in its cruel beauty, makes you choose which voice you'll obey. When fear wins quietly. Fear rarely announces itself. It doesn't always scream or tremble. Sometimes, it disguises itself as logic. Now's not the right time. I need more experience. I'll start when I feel ready. That's fear, polite, dressed in reason, convincing you that waiting equals wisdom. But waiting often becomes wasting. Because someday never comes. People don't fail because they're incapable. They fail because fear tells them they're not ready, and they believe it. The day fear froze me. I remember the night I almost quit writing. It was 2 a.m., and I was staring at a blank page. My last few projects had failed. My confidence was shattered. Fear whispered, you've already tried. You're just not good enough. It was subtle, almost kind, as if fear was trying to protect me from embarrassment. But then I remembered something my mentor once said. Fear is the liar that sounds most like the truth. That sentence hit me like lightning. Because fear never says, you can't. It says, you shouldn't. It speaks in safety, not truth. That night, I didn't conquer fear, but I moved with it. And that's when everything began to change. Courage is not the absence of fear. The world tells us to be fearless, but that's a myth. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to move forward despite it. Think of fear as a shadow. If you run from it, it chases you. If you face it, it fades behind you. Every person who ever achieved greatness still felt afraid. They just refused to let fear make their decisions. A soldier steps forward while terrified. A speaker stands on stage with shaking hands. A mother raises her child while doubting she's ready. Courage doesn't erase fear. It redefines it. Desire, the flame that pulls you forward. If fear protects you from pain, desire pulls you toward purpose. Desire is the soul's compass, the reminder that there's something more waiting beyond your comfort zone. Desire says, this matters. It's not greed, not vanity, it's hunger. The hunger to become what you were meant to be. Every invention, every revolution, every love story began with a single spark of desire strong enough to challenge fear. The Wright brothers desired to fly. Rosa Parks desired dignity. Every artist desires to express what words alone can't. Desire is sacred energy, but only if you have the courage to listen to it. The prison of comfort. Fear doesn't just make you hide. It makes you comfortable. And comfort is the most beautiful trap ever built. It whispers, you're fine here. And maybe you are, but fine kills more dreams than failure ever could. Comfort feels like peace, but it's really paralysis. It keeps you in the same job, the same relationship, the same routine, not because it's right, but because it's safe. But nothing grows in safety. Everything alive needs friction, challenge, and risk. The seed must break to become a tree. The bird must shatter the shell to fly. You must face fear to become yourself. The shadow of desire. Desire can also deceive if it's not grounded in truth. There are two kinds of desire, the ego's desire and the soul's desire. The ego wants attention, approval, power. The soul wants expression, purpose, growth. The ego's desire burns fast, it's fireworks. The soul's desire burns steady. It's the sunrise. That's why many people feel unfulfilled even after success, because they chased the wrong kind of desire. They won the battle for achievement, but lost the war for meaning. True desire isn't about getting more. It's about becoming more. A tale of two voices. There's a story about an old Cherokee teaching his grandson about life. He said, "Inside every person, there are two wolves. One is fear, full of doubt, anger, and hesitation. The other is desire, full of hope, courage, and love. They are always fighting." The boy thought for a moment and asked, "Which one wins?" The old man smiled. "The one you feed." That story may be ancient, but it's timeless truth. Every thought, every choice, every hesitation is food for one of those wolves. Every time you choose faith over fear, your desire grows stronger. Every time you choose comfort over courage, fear grows fatter. The war never ends, but you choose the winner every day. Fear's greatest trick. Fear has one powerful weapon: imagination. It doesn't just warn you about real danger. It creates fictional danger. It builds imaginary walls, imaginary critics, imaginary failures, all in your mind. You begin to fear things that don't even exist yet. You start to believe, what if I fail? What if they laugh? What if I lose everything? But what if you don't? What if it works? What if everything you ever wanted is on the other side of those questions? Fear paints fake disasters to keep you from real success. Don't let your imagination become your jailer. Let it become your wings. The turning point. When you finally stop letting fear drive, something miraculous happens. Desire starts steering again. That moment doesn't look dramatic. It's often small and quiet. A decision made in solitude. It could be sending that email, signing up for that class, saying no when you used to say yes, choosing growth instead of approval. That's when power shifts. Not because fear disappears, but because you no longer obey it. The anatomy of courage. Courage is built in 3 layers. 1. Acknowledgement. Admit you're afraid. Pretending you're fearless makes fear stronger. Naming it steals its power. 2. Action. Take one step forward while afraid. Motion creates confidence. 3. Alignment. Remember why you're doing it. Purpose turns fear into fuel. The secret is not to fight fear, it's to work with it. Because fear shows up in the exact place your greatest growth lives. The story of Laila. Laila dreamed of opening her own bakery. She'd been baking since she was a child. Every loaf was love, every cake was memory. But every time she thought of quitting her office job, fear stopped her. What if it fails? What will people say? What if I'm not good enough? For years, she listened. She stayed safe. Until one morning, she saw her reflection in the mirror. Tired, uninspired, dim. She realized she wasn't afraid of failing anymore. She was afraid of never trying. That day, she took her savings, rented a small corner shop, and started baking again. The first few months were brutal, sleepless nights, no profits, constant doubt. But one evening, a young boy walked in with his mother, tasted a slice of her chocolate cake, and said, "This tastes like home." Laila smiled, tears in her eyes. Because in that single moment, she knew her desire had won. Fear is temporary, regret is forever. Every fear you face is temporary. Every regret you avoid facing it, that lasts a lifetime. In the end, it's not the risks we take that haunt us. It's the chances we never gave ourselves. The relationships we didn't pursue. The dreams we delayed. The art we left unfinished. Fear protects your comfort. Desire protects your destiny. You can't serve both. A battle worth fighting. There will always be days when fear feels louder. When you doubt everything, your talent, your path, even your worth. That's okay. Fear's job is to challenge you. Your job is to keep walking anyway. Because courage isn't a one-time victory. It's a daily decision. Every morning, you rise and choose again. Today, I feed desire. That's how you win. Not in giant leaps, but in small steps, one brave act at a time. Final words, the fire and the shadow. Fear and desire will always live together, like fire and shadow. You can't erase fear, but you can refuse to let it dim your light. Fear asks, what if you fall? Desire answers, what if I fly? And maybe, just maybe, the purpose of fear isn't to stop you, but to sharpen you. To make sure that when you leap, you know exactly what you're leaping for. So the next time your heart races before a big decision, Don't curse the fear. Thank it. It means you're standing at the edge of growth. Then take the step anyway. Because beyond that edge, your destiny is waiting. Arms open, fire burning, whispering. Welcome home. You finally chose me. Chapter 4. Turning Pain into Power. Your scars aren't symbols of what broke you. They're proof of what refused to die. There comes a moment in every life when the fire doesn't just flicker, it hurts. Not the kind of hurt that comes from physical exhaustion or failure alone, but the kind that burns deep in the soul. The silent ache that whispers, I can't take anymore. Pain is universal. It visits quietly, without invitation, and often overstays its welcome. Yet behind its cruelty lies a paradox. Pain can destroy us, but it can also define us. It's not the pain itself that determines who we become, it's the meaning we assign to it. The psychology of pain, the hidden teacher. Psychologists have long said that pain is not just a signal of harm, it's a message. It tells us what matters, what we've lost, and where we need to grow. When someone loses a dream, a relationship, or even their self-belief, the pain that follows isn't just grief, it's identity collapse. The brain scrambles to make sense of the loss, asking questions like, who am I now? What's left for me? Was any of it worth it? In those questions lies the foundation of transformation. Because once you stop fighting the pain and start listening to it, something magical happens. You begin to uncover the lessons it's trying to teach. Pain says, you cared. You tried. You risked something for something you believed in. That realization shifts pain from being a punishment to being proof. Proof that you were alive enough to feel, brave enough to hope, and strong enough to lose. When life breaks you open, there's a Japanese art called kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired using gold. Instead of hiding the cracks, the artist fills them with shimmering lines, turning the fractures into beauty. That's what turning pain into power looks like in life. You don't hide the cracks. You highlight them. You show the world that you broke, but you rebuilt with gold. Real healing begins when you stop trying to erase the past and instead elevate it into your strength. Every failure, betrayal, heartbreak, or rejection becomes a chapter of resilience. Not a scar to hide, but a story to share. The reframing power, from suffering to strength. Here's the truth. Pain doesn't go away because we ignore it. It goes away when we reframe it. Reframing means choosing a new perspective on the same wound. For example, instead of I lost everything, you can say, I discovered what I truly need. Instead of they betrayed me, you can say, they revealed my strength to stand alone. Instead of I failed, you can say, I learned how to rise. This isn't toxic positivity. It's psychological resilience. It's not pretending things didn't hurt. It's realizing that hurt is part of human evolution. Every person who has ever become powerful, emotionally, mentally, or spiritually, has walked through pain. Not around it, not above it, through it. Emotional alchemy, the science of transformation. In neuroscience, there's a concept called neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself through repeated thoughts and behaviors. When you face pain consciously instead of repressing it, your brain begins to reshape itself around growth, not fear. This process, often called emotional alchemy, is the psychological transformation of pain into wisdom. It's the same force that allows survivors of trauma to become healers, the brokenhearted to become poets, and the fallen to become leaders. Pain, when faced with courage, doesn't just fade, it reconstructs you. It burns away illusion, ego, and weakness, leaving only what's real. That's why, in hindsight, we often say, that pain was the best thing that ever happened to me. Not because it was pleasant, but because it showed us who we are when everything else is stripped away. Stories of transformation. 1. The artist who lost his vision. There was once a painter in Italy who went blind after an accident. For months, he spiraled into despair. His art was his identity, and now it was gone. But one day, he began sculpting clay instead. His hands became his eyes. Years later, his sculptures were exhibited across Europe, and he said something unforgettable. When I lost my sight, I began to truly see. His pain became the birthplace of a new kind of beauty, one that didn't depend on what he lost, but on what he discovered inside himself. 2. The mother who turned grief into purpose. A woman who lost her child to a rare illness spent years paralyzed by grief. One night, sitting in the hospital's empty corridor, she promised herself, no other mother should go through this alone. She later founded a charity that helped thousands of families across the world. Her pain became her mission. Her loss became her light. Pain didn't vanish, it evolved. Pain is the sculptor of greatness. Think about every person you admire: Nelson Mandela, Oprah Winfrey, Viktor Frankl, Malala Yousafzai, J.K. Rowling. None of them found power through comfort. They found it through pain. Mandela found strength in 27 years of prison. Oprah found purpose through the wounds of childhood trauma. Frankl found meaning in the horrors of a concentration camp. They all turned their agony into something sacred: service, message, or movement. That's what pain does when you let it work for you instead of against you. It strips away all the noise and makes you ask, who do I want to become after this? Practical transformation: how to use pain as fuel. 1. Face it honestly. Stop pretending you're fine. Sit with your pain and let it speak. Every emotion is information. 2. Name it. Saying, I'm hurt because I felt unseen, is more powerful than saying, I'm just sad. Naming pain gives you control over it. 3. Find meaning. Ask, what lesson or growth might this be trying to give me? Sometimes, the answer is simple: patience, humility, or strength. 4. Create from it. Write, build, paint, serve, speak. Turn the ache into art or purpose. Creation is one of the most healing forms of expression. 5. Share it. The moment you speak your pain, you give others permission to heal too. The flame that pain ignites. Pain is like friction, uncomfortable, but necessary to create fire. Without the struggle, there's no strength. Without loss, there's no appreciation. Without pain, there's no depth. Every tear you've shed watered the soil of your future resilience. Every heartbreak expanded your emotional capacity to love again. Every failure humbled your ego and taught you endurance. Your pain doesn't define your weakness. It defines your willingness to feel deeply and still rise. From burned to blazing. Maybe you've been burned by love, betrayal, failure, or loss. Maybe you've wondered, why me? But what if, just what if, life wasn't punishing you? It was preparing you. Preparing you to handle the success you've prayed for. Preparing you to lead with empathy. Preparing you to be strong enough not to crumble when you finally arrive at your dream. Pain is never wasted. It's the tuition fee for wisdom. And once you've paid it, you earn an inner power no one can ever take away. Closing flame. So, when the night feels long and your heart feels heavy, remember this. The fire you're looking for isn't outside. It's being born inside the ashes of your pain. You don't need to escape it. You need to transform it. Because in the end, pain doesn't just burn, it forges. It turns ordinary souls into warriors, victims into victors, and broken hearts into blazing lights that show others the way. You are not what hurt you. You are what you became because of it. Chapter 5. The Courage to Begin Again. Every ending you survive is simply the universe whispering, start over, but this time, with wisdom. There's a silence that comes after everything falls apart. It's the sound that echoes when the noise of failure, heartbreak, or disappointment finally fades. That silence isn't peace, it's emptiness. The feeling of standing in the ruins of something you once believed in and wondering, how do I start again when I've lost everything? It's one of the hardest moments in human life, not the fall, but the moment after the fall, when you must decide whether to stay down or rise again. It's not willpower that brings you back to your feet. It's something deeper, the courage to begin again. When life forces a restart, every person at some point faces a chapter they never expected. The job that was supposed to be secure disappears overnight. The love that felt forever ends without warning. The dream you've given years to collapses before your eyes. And suddenly, you're left staring at an empty page of your life story. No plan, no roadmap, just pain and disbelief. The human instinct in that moment is to freeze. We cling to what's gone because letting go feels like erasing part of ourselves. But here's the truth. You can't rewrite the past, but you can reinvent the future. That's what beginning again means, not pretending nothing happened, but using what happened as material to build something wiser, truer, and stronger. The psychology of starting over. From a psychological lens, starting again is terrifying because it threatens the brain's need for certainty. The mind loves patterns. It wants safety, predictability, and familiarity. So when the old life burns down, your brain sounds the alarm. Stay here. Don't risk it again. It's safer to survive than to try. But safety and fulfillment rarely coexist. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite fear. It's the voice that says, yes, I might fail again. Yes, I'm scared, but I'd rather rebuild than rot in what's left. That's how the phoenix rises, not because the fire is gone, but because it chooses to rise through it. The rebirth of identity. One of the most painful parts of starting again is identity death. When we lose a job, a dream, or a person, we also lose the version of ourselves attached to it. You might whisper, I don't even know who I am anymore. And that's okay. That's not weakness. That's rebirth. Because identity isn't fixed, it's fluid. Who you are today is not who you were 5 years ago, or even yesterday. Starting over gives you the chance to consciously choose who you become next. You can decide what matters most, what no longer deserves your energy, what kind of strength you'll carry into your next chapter. This is the hidden gift inside loss. You get to start fresh, but with experience. The story of a fall and a rise. The musician who lost his voice. There was once a young musician named Alex. Music was his life, his escape, his identity, his everything. But after a sudden illness damaged his vocal cords, doctors told him he might never sing again. He went through every stage of grief, denial, anger, depression. For a year, he avoided anything related to music. But one night, sitting alone in his dark apartment, he picked up his old guitar, just to feel something again. He couldn't sing, but he began writing lyrics, pouring every ounce of his heartbreak into words. Those lyrics turned into songs for other artists. Years later, one of his songs became a global hit, sung by someone else's voice, but born from his pain. When asked how it felt, he said, "Losing my voice forced me to find my message." That's what beginning again means. Not returning to who you were, but becoming who you were meant to be. The courage formula. Psychologists describe courage as a mix of vulnerability, hope, and action. It's not an emotional surge, it's a conscious choice. Every courageous person begins from the same place, fear. 1. Vulnerability says, I've been hurt, but I'm still open. 2. Hope whispers, maybe this time, it'll work out. 3. Action says, even if it doesn't, I'll grow through it. That combination, raw honesty, fragile hope, and steady action, creates unstoppable momentum. Courage isn't about leaping without fear. It's about moving forward while shaking. The emotional weight of starting over. There's a certain grief that comes with beginning again. Because no matter how positive you are, part of you still misses what was. The truth is, it's okay to mourn what you lost and still move forward. Healing isn't a straight line. It's more like breathing, in and out, expanding and contracting. Some days you'll feel powerful, other days you'll crumble. Both are part of progress. The key is to keep walking. Even if you move 1 inch at a time, you're still not where you were yesterday. Famous rebirths, proof that it's possible. J.K. Rowling wrote Harry Potter as a broke, single mother on welfare, rejected by multiple publishers. Her story didn't begin in success, it began in rock bottom. Steve Jobs was fired from Apple, the very company he founded. That humiliation became the fire that helped him return and build one of the most revolutionary empires in history. Oprah Winfrey was fired from her first TV job, told she wasn't fit for television. She didn't just return, she redefined the industry. Each of them had one thing in common, the courage to begin again. They didn't cling to their past version. They became new versions of themselves. The internal dialogue that changes everything. When starting over, your inner voice becomes your most important ally or your worst enemy. You can let it say, "You're too old. It's too late. You already failed." Or you can train it to say, "You're wiser now. You've survived worse. This time, it's your turn." Every rebirth begins with a conversation between your fear and your faith. Feed the right one. Rebuilding from the inside out. When life falls apart, most people rush to rebuild externals, jobs, relationships, money. But the real foundation must be built inside first. Ask yourself, what have I learned about who I am? What patterns am I not willing to repeat? What truth do I want to live by now? The moment you answer those questions, your foundation shifts from fragility to authenticity. You stop chasing validation and start creating meaning. And meaning is the ultimate motivator. It's what keeps the fire burning even in storms. Ordinary heroes of new beginnings. You don't have to be famous to begin again with courage. Think of the single father who goes back to school at 40 to give his kids a better life. The widow who learns to laugh again after years of silence. The person who battles depression and still shows up to work, even when every step hurts. Those are quiet heroes, the ones the world doesn't see but the universe applauds. Their stories prove that starting over isn't reserved for the extraordinary. It's the essence of being human. Lessons from the restart. 1. Rock bottom is not the end. It's the solid ground to rebuild on. 2. Starting small is still starting. The biggest trees grow from invisible roots. 3. The past prepared you. Every wound taught you something about strength. 4. No one begins again as a beginner. You begin as a survivor. You're not the same person who fell. You're the one who got up differently. The fire that comes after the fall. In every story of rebirth, there's a sacred moment when fear turns into gratitude. It doesn't happen instantly, but one day, you'll look back and whisper, I see why that had to happen. Because pain shapes purpose. Loss births clarity. Endings clear space for beginnings that are truly yours. You may not have chosen your fall, but you can choose your rise. And that choice, that single act of courage, can change everything. Closing flame. So if you're standing in the ashes, wondering if you'll ever feel alive again, you will. Not because everything will magically fix itself, but because you'll find the fire again inside yourself. You'll rebuild differently. You'll love deeper. You'll live truer. That's the beauty of beginnings. They come disguised as endings. So, take a deep breath. Let the past rest. Look at the empty page in front of you, and write your next chapter with the ink of resilience. Because you've fallen before. And this time, you're not just getting back up. You're rising with purpose. Chapter 6. Small Flames, Big Impact. The smallest spark can light 1,000 torches. Never underestimate your flame. There's a story that repeats itself across every generation. The story of one person who thought their actions were too small to matter, until the world was changed because they decided to act anyway. We live in a time obsessed with big goals, big fame, big results. But history and life prove something powerful. It's the small flames that often ignite the biggest fires. The whisper that turns into a movement. The simple act of kindness that changes someone's will to live. The decision to get up one more day when no one would blame you for quitting. This chapter isn't about the giants of success. It's about the quiet heroes, the ones who don't realize their light is shaping destinies. The butterfly effect of courage. Science calls it the butterfly effect. The idea that a butterfly flapping its wings in one part of the world can create a hurricane across the globe. It's poetic, but it's also psychological truth. Every small action creates ripples far beyond what we can see. When you smile at a stranger, you might pull them out of despair. When you share your story, you might give someone the courage to survive another night. When you show up, imperfectly but honestly, you remind others that they can too. It's not grand gestures that change the world. It's consistency with heart. The teacher who planted futures. In a small rural village, there was a teacher named Nadia. She worked in a broken-down classroom with peeling walls, 3 textbooks, and a handful of pencils. Her students came from poor families. Many walked miles just to sit in her class. Most people would have said it was hopeless, that she couldn't make a difference with so little. But Nadia refused to see what she didn't have. She focused on what she did have, a voice, a heart, and a belief that her students deserved more. She began teaching not just lessons, but hope. She told her students, "You are not defined by your village. You are defined by your vision." One of her students, a shy boy named Arif, grew up to become an engineer. He built water systems that now serve thousands of people across his country. When he was asked who inspired him, he said, "A teacher who believed I could matter." That's the thing about small flames. They don't just burn, they ignite others. The modern trap, believing you're too small. In the social media age, people are drowning in comparison. You scroll and see billionaires, influencers, and prodigies, and somewhere inside, a voice whispers, "Who am I compared to them?" But here's the truth. Impact has nothing to do with audience size. It has everything to do with authenticity. Your small business that helps 5 people? It matters. Your art that comforts one lonely soul? It matters. Your resilience that inspires your child to keep going? It matters. We've been conditioned to measure worth in numbers, but the soul measures it in meaning. You don't have to change the world. You just have to change someone's world. The power of invisible impact. Think about this. Every movement that ever shook humanity began quietly. Martin Luther King Jr. didn't start with 1,000,000 people. He started with a conviction and a microphone. Mother Teresa didn't begin with a foundation. She began by picking up one dying man off the streets of Calcutta. Malala Yousafzai started not with an army, but with a blog post, a teenage girl writing about her right to go to school. None of them knew how far their flame would spread. They just refused to let it die. And that's what small flames do. They burn quietly, steadily, until the wind of courage catches them, and suddenly, the world changes shape. The science of small wins. Psychologists call it the compound effect. Small actions repeated daily create monumental change over time. You don't climb mountains in one leap. You take one step, and another, and another. And one day, you turn around and realize how high you've climbed. The brain rewards progress, not perfection. Even tiny victories release dopamine, building momentum and confidence. So when you start small, writing 1 page a day, running 5 minutes, practicing gratitude, you're not being weak. You're building strength brick by brick. Small flames build endurance. Big fires burn out. The emotional truth, small acts heal deeply. Sometimes, the smallest gestures carry the heaviest emotional weight. A message saying, "I'm proud of you." A phone call checking in. A stranger holding the door when you feel invisible. Human beings are wired for connection. Our nervous systems heal through empathy. That's why one act of kindness can pierce through depression or loneliness in ways words cannot. You never know what someone's carrying. And you never know how much light you give off just by being kind. The fire within the ordinary. We celebrate the extraordinary, but real life is made of ordinary people doing extraordinary things in silence. The nurse working 12-hour shifts while raising kids alone. The artist painting after midnight because the world forgot to notice. The man rebuilding his life quietly after addiction or loss. These people are the unseen architects of humanity. They don't post their pain. They just show up, again and again, proving that persistence itself is a form of heroism. The ripple you'll never see. Some of your impact, you'll never witness. You'll never know how your words made someone cry in gratitude. You'll never know how your example stopped someone from giving up. You'll never see how your healing gave others permission to heal too. But that's okay, because true purpose isn't about being seen, it's about serving. The universe keeps score differently than humans do. When you act from integrity, compassion, and love, your flame burns far beyond your sight. The story of the candle maker. In a small town lived an old candle maker named Elias. He had no fame, no family, and no fortune, just a workshop filled with the scent of wax and wicks. Every evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, he would light one candle and place it on his windowsill. People walking home would see the soft glow and smile. It became a symbol of comfort, a quiet reminder that warmth still existed in the dark. One harsh winter, Elias passed away. For days, his windows stayed dark. But something unexpected happened. Every house in the village began lighting candles in their windows, one by one, until the entire street shimmered in gold. A man who thought his life was small had unknowingly lit a town's spirit. That's the legacy of a small flame. It doesn't die, it multiplies. The hidden power of daily fire. The truth is, you don't need to make a big move to create big meaning. You just need to keep your inner fire alive through daily acts of courage. Get up when it's easier to stay down. Choose kindness when it's easier to be cold. Speak truth when it's easier to stay silent. Those small fires are what keep the world from going dark. Because every act of light, no matter how small, pushes back against the night. Your flame matters. If you ever think, "I'm not doing enough," remember this. You being alive, showing up, trying again, holding hope, is enough. The world doesn't need perfect people. It needs present people. People who care, who create, who believe in something better. You don't have to light the whole world. Just keep one corner of it warm, and that warmth will spread farther than you can imagine. Closing flame. So here's the truth that changes everything. You don't need to be a wildfire to change the world. You just need to burn consistently. One spark of kindness. One act of faith. One brave step. The biggest revolutions start in silence, in someone's heart, with one choice. So don't wait for perfect timing or grand opportunities. Light your candle, right where you are, because someone, somewhere, is lost in the dark, and your small flame might be the light that guides them home. Chapter 7. The Fire That Doesn't Die. Here are fires that burn bright and vanish, and then there are fires that refuse to die, even when the rain falls hardest. This chapter is about that second kind, the kind of fire that flickers in the human spirit, not for attention, not for applause, but because it simply refuses to go out. Every person who ever became unstoppable had this fire. They were broken, bruised, betrayed, overlooked, and still, they burned. Because the fire inside them had a purpose greater than pain. When the flame almost fades, there comes a moment in everyone's life when the world feels cold. You try, you fail. You love, you lose. You hope, and the world answers with silence. In that silence, something whispers, maybe it's time to give up. But inside you, there's another whisper. Quieter, fiercer, a spark that says, not yet. I'm not done. That's the fire that doesn't die. It's not loud. It doesn't always look like confidence or positivity. Sometimes it's just you, lying awake at night, telling yourself, I'll try again tomorrow. That whisper, that single ember of willpower, is where every comeback begins. The boxer who refused to stay down. In the late 1970s, a young boxer named James "Buster" Douglas stood in the shadow of Mike Tyson, the undefeated world champion feared by all. Tyson was destruction in human form. When Buster's mother died just weeks before their fight, people said he'd crumble. They called it a mismatch. But Buster had made his mother a promise. He'd do his best. On fight night, Tyson came swinging, hard and merciless. Buster was knocked down in the 8th round. Reporters thought it was over. But as he lay on the mat, gasping, something deeper than pride rose inside him. He remembered his promise. He got up, and in the 10th round, against all odds, Buster Douglas knocked out Mike Tyson, one of the greatest upsets in sports history. He didn't win because he was stronger. He won because his fire, the one lit by love and loss, refused to die. The science of resilience. Psychologists call this kind of endurance psychological resilience, the ability to keep functioning through pain, trauma, or stress. But it's not about being emotionless or unbreakable. It's about bending without breaking. When your brain experiences failure or rejection, it naturally tries to protect you by shutting down your motivation. But here's the secret. Every time you act despite that, you rewire your mind. You teach yourself that pain doesn't mean stop. It means grow stronger. Resilience isn't inherited. It's built, one scar, one choice, one sleepless night at a time. The fire of an ordinary hero. In a small town, a single mother named Hina worked 2 jobs to keep her children in school. Every night, when she came home exhausted, she'd light a small candle in front of her kitchen window and whisper, "We're going to make it." Her kids saw her struggle, but they also saw her light. That candle never missed a night, no matter how late she came home. Years later, her son became a doctor. In every hospital room he enters, he tells his patients, "You'll get through this. I promise." When asked where that faith comes from, he says, "My mother's candle never stopped burning. So neither can I." That's what this chapter is about. The quiet, invisible courage that passes from one generation to the next, from one heart to another, like a sacred flame. Pain as the fuel. Here's a truth most people run from. Pain doesn't extinguish your fire. It feeds it. Look back at every turning point in your life. Every heartbreak, every failure, every rejection. It either broke you down or built you up. And what made the difference? The decision to use that pain as fuel. There's a reason broken people often become the most compassionate leaders, the most powerful artists, the most devoted healers. They've been through darkness, and they've learned how to turn it into light. Pain is life's test. Will it destroy your flame, or will it make it burn hotter? The story of Nick Vujicic, the fire without limbs. Nick Vujicic was born without arms or legs. As a child, he was bullied, humiliated, and hopeless. At 10 years old, he tried to take his own life. But something inside him, a flicker of faith, a whisper of purpose, told him, maybe my story can still matter. He began speaking about his struggles. Slowly, people began to listen. Today, Nick travels the world, motivating millions. Not because his life is perfect, but because his fire never died. He once said, "If you can't get a miracle, become one." That's what eternal fire looks like. It burns not because it's never hurt, but because it refuses to stop giving warmth. What happens when you keep the fire alive? Keeping your fire alive doesn't just change you. It changes everything around you. When you stay hopeful in hard times, others borrow your hope. When you stand tall after being broken, others find strength in your shadow. When you choose to rise again, you give others permission to rise too. Fire spreads. Resilience is contagious. You don't have to shout your strength. Your survival itself becomes a message. The fire in the ashes. After losing everything, her husband, her home, her health, a woman named Maria began painting. Not because she wanted to be an artist, but because she needed to breathe again. Her first painting was rough, made with cheap colors and trembling hands. But it told a story of loss, love, and rebirth. One day, her work was displayed in a small local exhibition. A man approached her with tears in his eyes and said, "Your painting made me want to live again." That night, Maria wrote in her journal, "Maybe that's why I'm still here, to keep the fire burning for those who've lost theirs." She didn't know it then, but her art would go on to help thousands in trauma centers around the world. Sometimes your story isn't meant to inspire millions, it's meant to save one. And that's enough. The psychology of unbreakable fire. What makes some people rise again and again, while others fade out? It's not luck. It's not strength. It's meaning. When people believe their struggle has purpose, something to fight for beyond themselves, they become unstoppable. Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor and author of Man's Search for Meaning, wrote that those who survived the camps weren't necessarily the strongest or healthiest. They were the ones who found meaning in their suffering. He said, "Those who have a why to live can bear almost any how." Your fire doesn't die when you know why it's burning. Reigniting the flame. Sometimes your fire doesn't go out. It just gets buried under ashes. Disappointment. Fatigue. Fear. If you feel that way right now, don't panic. Don't shame yourself for being tired. Just start small. Do one thing that reminds you of who you are. Go for that walk. Write that page. Send that message. You don't need to burn like the sun. You just need to spark again. And once the spark catches, it'll remember how to roar. Closing the flame. The fire that doesn't die isn't loud. It's quiet. It's the warmth in your chest when the world feels frozen. It's the heartbeat that says, "I'm still here." You don't have to be unbreakable to keep going. You just have to keep lighting the match again and again until the darkness bows to your persistence. Because in the end, life isn't about how many times you fall. It's about how many times you reignite. And when your fire burns for purpose, not recognition, it never truly goes out. The fire within you was never meant to be perfect, only eternal. Chapter 8. Burn the doubts, not yourself. There's a fine line between burning bright and burning out, between giving your all and losing yourself in the fire. In a world that glorifies hustle, noise, and never stop energy, too many people forget fire needs air to breathe. You can't keep the flame alive if you're suffocating under the weight of your own doubts. This chapter is not about working harder. It's about working wiser, about learning how to burn away the lies that tell you you're not enough, not ready, not worthy, while keeping your spirit intact. The fire that turns against you. There's a dangerous moment every dreamer faces, when passion turns into pressure. It begins innocently. You want to do your best. You push harder. You sacrifice sleep, joy, peace. And slowly, the fire that once gave you purpose starts to consume you. You stop creating from love and start chasing approval. You stop dreaming and start surviving. You begin to believe that rest is weakness and doubt means failure. That's not drive, that's destruction. And many people never notice the shift until the fire within becomes the fire that burns them alive. The silent killer, self-doubt. Doubt doesn't arrive screaming. It whispers, "Who are you to think you can do this? You're too late. You're not talented enough." It's quiet, convincing, and often disguised as realism. Psychologists say doubt is one of the most persistent forms of self-sabotage because it disguises itself as logic. You call it being practical, but it's really fear wearing a mask. You say, I'm just waiting for the right time. But what you're really doing is waiting for fear to disappear, and it never will. The musician who almost quit. A young singer named Sarah Bareilles once said she almost gave up before her big break. Her early songs were rejected by every label. Critics told her she didn't fit the market. She cried herself to sleep, believing maybe they were right. But one day, sitting at her piano, she wrote a song out of frustration, a letter to her own fear. That song became Brave. It didn't just become a hit. It became an anthem for millions who needed courage to speak, sing, or live honestly. She once said, "That song was me saying to my doubt, I see you, but you don't get to win." Doubt lost that day because she stopped fighting it and started using it as fuel. Doubt is a signal, not a sentence. When you feel doubt, it doesn't mean you're unworthy. It means you're growing. Doubt appears every time you approach something that matters. It's your mind's way of asking, are you ready to become someone new? So when it shows up, don't panic, pause, listen to it, thank it, and then move forward anyway. Because the people who change their lives aren't the ones who never doubt. They're the ones who act despite it. The firefighter and the inner battle. There's a story of a firefighter named Amir who once entered a collapsing building to save a child. He said later that it wasn't courage that pushed him forward, it was training. But when asked what training really was, he smiled and said, "It's choosing action over fear, 1 second at a time." That's what life demands from you too. Doubt will scream, "Stop," but purpose whispers, "Go." And the more you choose the whisper over the scream, the louder your fire grows. Courage isn't the absence of doubt, it's the mastery of it. When fire becomes a mirror. Burnout doesn't only happen because of overwork. It happens when you keep trying to earn your worth. When you keep lighting fires for everyone else, but forget to keep one burning for yourself. The truth? You are not a machine. You're a soul. And a soul doesn't thrive on constant motion. It thrives on meaning. You have permission to slow down, to breathe, to say, "Not today, I'm refueling." Because even the sun sets to rise again. Burning doubt's the right way. There's a kind of fire that destroys and a kind that purifies. You have to learn to light the second kind. So the next time doubt whispers, "You're not enough," burn that lie with truth, "I'm growing." You failed before. Burn it with perspective. That was training. What will people think? Burn it with freedom. They'll think what they want anyway. Every time you challenge a limiting belief, you take back power. Every time you act despite fear, you teach your brain that courage is your new normal. You're not meant to be fearless. You're meant to be on fire with purpose. The story of the potter. In Japan, there's an ancient art called kintsugi, repairing broken pottery with gold. Instead of hiding cracks, artists fill them with gold lacquer, making them more beautiful than before. The belief behind it is profound. What was once broken becomes priceless when repaired with love. That's how you burn doubts, by embracing your imperfections, not hiding them. Every scar, every failure, every fall, is a golden crack in the pottery of your becoming. When you learn to see your flaws as proof of endurance, doubt loses its grip. The psychology of self-belief. Studies from Stanford University show that people who view failure as information rather than identity recover faster and perform better long-term. It's not talent that predicts success, it's resilience. And resilience grows strongest when you learn to question your doubts instead of obeying them. So next time your inner voice says, "You can't," ask yourself, who told me that? Most of the time, it wasn't you. It was the world, an old wound, or someone else's limitation disguised as advice. You don't have to carry their fears any longer. The story of the teacher. There was a teacher who kept a burned-out candle on her desk. When her students asked why she didn't throw it away, she said, "Because even when the flame's gone, the wax remembers the fire." She told them, when you doubt yourself, remember, you've burned before. You can burn again. You've survived every fear, every heartbreak, every moment of uncertainty so far. That means you have proof, living proof, that your flame can always reignite. You are the keeper of the fire. The world will always try to dim you. Fear will always whisper its doubts. But remember, the flame was never outside you. You don't need permission to shine. You don't need certainty to move. All you need is to protect your fire, with rest, with belief, with love. Because your purpose doesn't need to burn others to stay alive. It just needs you to stop burning yourself. So feed your fire with hope, not pressure, with love, not comparison, with faith, not fear. And when the world says you can't, smile, strike the match again, and whisper, "Watch me." Doubt is the smoke. You are the fire. Chapter 9. The Heat of Persistence. Persistence isn't pretty. It's not motivational posters, fancy quotes, or dramatic movie music. It's the quiet, repetitive grind that happens when no one's watching. When your heart's tired, your hands are blistered, and your faith feels paper thin. It's the moment when quitting whispers like relief, and yet, you don't. You show up again. You push again. You rise again. That's the heat of persistence. The fire that doesn't flash but simmers, slow and steady, until it turns iron into steel. The desert days. Every dreamer faces their desert, the long stretch between starting and succeeding. At first, you're fueled by excitement. The horizon glows with promise. But then, days turn into months, and enthusiasm dries up under the sun of repetition. That's where most people turn back. But the persistent ones, they keep walking. Not because they don't feel the heat, but because they've decided the dream is worth sweating for. When you've burned through every excuse and every ounce of easy motivation, that's when persistence takes over. It's not adrenaline anymore. It's conviction. The boxer who refused to fall. There was once a young boxer named James Buster Douglas. The world had already written him off before he ever entered the ring with Mike Tyson, the undefeated, unstoppable force of the 90s. No one gave Douglas a chance. But 2 days before the fight, his mother passed away. Reporters said he was done, that he wouldn't even show up. Yet he did. And when they asked why, he said, "Because my mother believed in me. I have to prove her right." In the 8th round, Tyson knocked him down. Everyone thought it was over. But Douglas got up. Not because he wasn't hurt, but because persistence whispered louder than pain. He came back, and in the 10th round, he did the impossible. He knocked Mike Tyson out. When the world counted him out, his persistence counted him in. That's what persistence is, the unglamorous, bleeding refusal to stay down. When motivation dies, discipline takes the wheel. Motivation is an emotion. It rises and falls. But persistence, that's a choice. You won't always want to show up. There'll be days your body aches, your mind screams, "Enough," and your spirit questions everything. But that's when persistence quietly walks in, looks you in the eyes, and says, "We're not done yet." Greatness doesn't come from bursts of inspiration. It comes from patterns of endurance. The ones who last aren't the ones who sprint the hardest. They're the ones who keep walking after everyone else has stopped. The man who painted every day. Vincent van Gogh sold only one painting while he was alive. Just one. He battled loneliness, poverty, and mental illness. But he painted every single day. He once wrote to his brother Theo, "I am seeking, I am striving, I am in it with all my heart." That line, simple, pure, captures the essence of persistence. He didn't paint because the world rewarded him. He painted because the act itself made him feel alive. And today, the world knows his name, not because of luck, but because he never stopped creating when no one cared. The heat that hardens, not hurts. Persistence isn't about suffering endlessly. It's about allowing the struggle to shape you. The heat of persistence can burn you. Yes, but if you learn to endure it, it will also temper you. Think of blacksmiths. They heat metal until it glows, then hammer it into shape. Without heat and pressure, it stays fragile. Life does the same. It will test you, hammer you, stretch you beyond comfort. But every time you endure, you become unbreakable. The marathon mindset. In 1968, during the Olympic marathon in Mexico City, a runner named John Stephen Akhwari from Tanzania fell early in the race and dislocated his knee. Most thought he would quit. But hours later, when the stadium was nearly empty, Akhwari limped across the finish line. When asked why he didn't give up, he said, "My country did not send me 5,000 miles to start the race. They sent me 5,000 miles to finish it." That's persistence, the sacred act of finishing what you started, even when no one's clapping anymore. When you lose momentum, every dream hits a wall. Momentum dies. Results plateau. The progress you could once see becomes invisible. That's where persistence earns its name. Because in those invisible seasons, faith becomes your fuel. You won't always see the growth, but beneath the surface, your roots are digging deeper. Like bamboo, which spends years growing underground before it shoots up almost overnight. Persistence isn't just what you do when things are working. It's what you do when nothing seems to be. The psychology of the long game. According to a Harvard study on success and habit formation, the single biggest predictor of long-term achievement wasn't IQ, wealth, or social background. It was grit. The ability to persevere toward long-term goals, despite setbacks, boredom, or obstacles. Grit outperforms talent every time. Because persistence turns potential into reality, one repetition at a time. That's why most dreams die not because they're impossible, but because people stop too soon. Persistence in the quiet moments. There's a myth that persistence means always moving, always fighting. But sometimes persistence means resting without quitting. Taking a breath is not giving up. Slowing down is not failure. Even when you step back, as long as you're still facing forward, you're still in the fight. There's persistence and patience. In healing. In choosing to rebuild your strength instead of pretending you don't need it. The fire doesn't go out when you rest, it refuels. The story of the potter's wheel. There's a potter who spends hours spinning a lump of clay. He shapes it, reforms it, starts again. Sometimes, the clay collapses. An apprentice once asked him, "Don't you get tired of starting over?" The potter smiled and said, "The clay teaches patience. Every collapse brings me closer to the perfect shape." That's what persistence really is, not perfection, but patience. The willingness to begin again, with more wisdom than before. You have come too far. Think about it. Everything you've endured so far, every setback, every night you told yourself you couldn't keep going. Yet you did. You've survived too much to start doubting your strength now. You've carried dreams through storms most people would never dare face. You owe it to the person you were, the one who started this journey, to finish it strong. Persistence is not about waiting for the perfect moment. It's about creating momentum even when it hurts. Fireproof faith. The heat of persistence teaches you that pain doesn't last forever, but quitting makes it permanent. And every scar you carry from pushing forward is proof that you fought for something that mattered. Faith doesn't always look like confidence. Sometimes it looks like dragging yourself through another day whispering, "I'll try again tomorrow." And that whisper, that fragile, quiet, relentless whisper, is the sound of your fire still burning. The flame that outlasts the storm. When the world tells you to stop, persistence says, "I'm not finished yet." When fear laughs at you, persistence says, "Watch me rise again." When the results don't show up, persistence reminds you that growth happens in the unseen. The fire of persistence doesn't need applause. It doesn't need validation. It only needs you, showing up, again and again, no matter how heavy your heart or how slow your steps. Because in the end, persistence isn't about being the fastest, the strongest, or the most gifted. It's about refusing to let the flame die when everyone else goes cold. So feed your fire, not with instant results, but with relentless belief. And one day, when you look back, you'll realize the fire that kept you alive wasn't luck or talent or timing. It was you and the heat of your persistence. Keep walking through the fire. The ones who don't stop are the ones who become it. Chapter 9. Lighting the path for others. A candle loses nothing by lighting another. James Keller. There comes a point in every journey when the fire that once burned to prove something, to heal something, or to achieve something, begins to burn for someone else. It's the quiet moment when success stops being about you and becomes about significance. When your scars become maps for others still lost in the dark. That's what this chapter is about. How the strongest flames are the ones that light the way for others. The shift from me to we. Most people begin their path chasing something personal, success, healing, recognition, freedom. But as they grow, they discover something far greater, the fulfillment that comes from helping someone else climb the same mountain. Think of Nelson Mandela. For 27 years, he sat in a small prison cell, denied freedom, comfort, and even hope. But instead of letting bitterness consume him, he decided his pain would have purpose. When he finally walked free, he didn't just fight for his own liberation. He lit a fire that inspired a nation to believe in forgiveness over vengeance. His strength wasn't just his endurance. It was his ability to turn his suffering into a light that guided millions. And that's the quiet truth about real leadership. You don't lead by standing above others. You lead by walking through the fire with them. The chain of inspiration. Sometimes, it doesn't take fame or grand gestures to change lives. Sometimes it's the teacher who stays after class to help a struggling student find confidence. The nurse who whispers, "You're going to make it," to a patient who's given up. The single mother working double shifts, teaching her kids through action that resilience is built, not given. There's a man named Derek Clark, once homeless as a teenager, told he'd never amount to anything. He could have vanished into statistics, but instead, he used his story to build motivational programs for youth across the U.S. He tells them, "Your past is not your potential." And those words aren't theory, they're lived truth. Every time Derek speaks, a fire lights somewhere. Maybe a young girl decides not to drop out. Maybe a boy puts down a gun and picks up a dream. Derek doesn't see all those sparks, but they're there, spreading. That's the beautiful paradox of service. You rarely get to see the full blaze your flame creates, lighting the way in everyday life. You don't need a stage, a title, or millions of followers to make an impact. Sometimes, all it takes is presence. When the world feels cold, kindness is heat. When someone feels unseen, listening is light. When fear takes over, your example of courage becomes a beacon. Think of Maya Angelou, whose poetry turned personal pain into universal healing. She once said, "I've learned that people will forget what you said, forget what you did, but never forget how you made them feel." Her words, her presence, and her authenticity helped others see beauty in their own brokenness. Or Nick Vujicic, born without arms or legs, who faced unimaginable despair. He once thought his life had no meaning until he realized his story could give hope to millions. Now, he stands, figuratively and emotionally, before crowds worldwide, teaching that your limitations are only as real as your belief in them. Every time he smiles, he's proof that the fire inside you can outshine anything outside you. The ripple effect of courage. Every act of courage, no matter how small, sends out ripples. When Malala Yousafzai defied the Taliban and demanded education for girls, she wasn't thinking about winning a Nobel Prize. She was thinking about lighting a path for those who would come after her, young girls who might one day sit in classrooms because she refused to be silent. When Chadwick Boseman, battling cancer in silence, kept acting in roles that inspired millions, he showed that service doesn't always need an announcement. Sometimes, you light the path even as your own fire flickers. His legacy didn't end with his life. It burned into the hearts of people who learned from his quiet strength. These people remind us, lighting the path for others doesn't mean you have to be perfect. It means you show up, with authenticity, with scars, with truth. From survivor to guide. There's a point when survivors become guides. It's when your pain transforms into perspective, when your lessons become lanterns. Imagine a young woman named Aisha, who survived an abusive home and grew up believing she was worthless. Years later, she started volunteering at a women's shelter. One night, a terrified girl walked in, shaking, hopeless, ready to give up. Aisha sat beside her, took her hand, and said, "I've been there, and you can rebuild." That's all she said. But in that moment, she passed a torch. You see, you don't have to have all the answers to change someone's life. You just need to share your fire, the warmth that comes from your truth, your resilience, your journey. Becoming a lighthouse. The most powerful people in the world are not those who control others, but those who guide them. A lighthouse doesn't run into the storm to save ships. It simply stands strong and shines its light, so others can find their way. That's what being a source of light means. You don't have to fix everyone. You just have to stand tall, let your light shine through the cracks of your story, and trust that it will reach whoever needs it. Your journey, the pain, the lessons, the triumphs, all of it becomes the message someone else needs to hear. Passing the torch. One of the greatest joys in life is realizing that your story has meaning beyond you. When you help someone else rise, you rise higher too. Maybe your dream isn't just about success anymore. Maybe it's about legacy. Maybe it's about making sure someone else doesn't have to start from zero. So light candles wherever you go. Smile at the stranger. Mentor the lost. Share your wisdom without expectation. Every small act of light pushes back the darkness a little more. Because someday, someone will say, "I kept going because of you." And that moment, that single sentence, is worth more than any fortune or fame. Your fire's purpose. The fire within you wasn't meant to stay contained. It was meant to spread, to warm others, to ignite hope, to remind humanity that no darkness lasts forever. So keep burning, keep giving, keep lighting the way. Because in the end, the greatest proof of your strength won't be in how high you climbed, but in how many others could see the path because of your light. Chapter 10. The Phoenix Within. Our greatest glory is not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. Confucius. There's a point in life when everything you built seems to crumble. Dreams, relationships, confidence, even your identity. It's that moment when the fire that once fueled you turns inward and feels like it's consuming everything in its path. But here's the truth that most people don't see in the middle of that chaos. You're not being destroyed. You're being reforged. Every phoenix must burn before it can rise. The ashes we fear. People talk about success like it's a staircase, step after step upward. But real growth is more like a fire. It burns, it destroys, and only then does it create. The ashes you're standing in right now, they're not the end. They're the beginning of something purer, stronger, more resilient than you've ever been. When Thomas Edison's factory burned down in 1914, taking years of research with it, reporters expected him to collapse. Instead, he said, "Thank God all our mistakes were burned up. Now we can start again fresh." That's the Phoenix mindset. Where most people see devastation, a phoenix sees purification. When you're burned, you're being born. There's a man named John O'Leary. When he was 9 years old, a fire burned 100% of his body. Doctors gave him no chance to live. He spent 5 months in a hospital, endured dozens of surgeries, and countless moments of agony. But what made him survive wasn't medicine, it was will. Years later, John became a motivational speaker, helping thousands rediscover their strength. He didn't just recover physically, he was reborn spiritually. His message to the world: your scars are proof that you were stronger than whatever tried to destroy you. You see, that's what the Phoenix teaches us. The pain that tries to kill you is the same fire that creates the new you. The fire within is not the enemy. When life breaks down, most people try to escape their pain. They drown it, numb it, or hide it. But the fire within you doesn't want to destroy you. It wants to transform you. Pain is your teacher. Loss is your sculptor. Failure is your forge. Think about J.K. Rowling, who was broke, divorced, and living on welfare before Harry Potter became a global phenomenon. She wrote her first book in cafes, often with her baby sleeping beside her, rejected by publisher after publisher. But she kept writing, kept believing, not because life was easy, but because her soul demanded expression. Her pain didn't silence her, it sharpened her. And through it, she gave the world magic. That's the power of the Phoenix, to turn what was meant to destroy you into what defines you. Rebirth is never pretty. We romanticize transformation, as if rising from ashes means glowing feathers and effortless flight. But rebirth is messy. It's crying in silence. It's waking up with fear, but moving anyway. It's losing people who no longer fit your new wings. It's letting go of the old version of you that can't walk into your next chapter. There's an old saying, the same fire that melts butter hardens steel. You choose which one you become. Every breakdown carries the potential of a breakthrough. If you stop asking why me and start asking, what is this trying to teach me? The unknown phoenixes. Not every phoenix makes headlines. Some rise quietly, unseen, but their power is no less remarkable. Like the single father who worked night shifts, studied by day, and finally opened his own small business after years of rejection. Or the woman who left a toxic marriage with nothing but her dignity and rebuilt her confidence piece by piece until she stood tall again. Or the cancer survivor who uses her second chance not just to live, but to serve, volunteering at hospitals, holding the hands of those who think their lives are over. These are everyday phoenixes, proof that rebirth is not just for the chosen few. It's for anyone brave enough to face the flames. Burn what no longer serves you. To rise, something has to burn. Fear, doubt, ego, old habits, toxic people. A phoenix doesn't cling to its old feathers. It lets them burn. That's what allows it to soar higher than before. What are you still holding on to that's keeping you from rising? Maybe it's a belief that you're not enough. Maybe it's resentment from someone who hurt you. Maybe it's the version of you that keeps apologizing for wanting more. Let it burn. Not in anger, but in liberation. Because you can't become new if you're still protecting what's old. The flame of renewal. The most powerful kind of fire isn't loud, it's steady. It's that quiet determination that says, I will not give up. It's that inner whisper that tells you, this is not how my story ends. When everything feels lost, remember, the phoenix doesn't rise because it's invincible. It rises because it refuses to stay down. You don't need to have everything figured out. You just need to trust that the ashes you're standing in are fertile ground for the next version of you. That's what makes the phoenix immortal. The new you is waiting. Here's the truth most people miss. The fire that broke you is the same fire that woke you. Every hardship has been preparing you for the person you were always meant to become. Every rejection taught you self-worth. Every heartbreak taught you compassion. Every loss stripped away what was false, leaving only what was real. You've already been burned. Now it's time to rise. Because you, yes, you, are the phoenix within your own life story. You are proof that rebirth is possible. You are proof that pain has purpose. You are proof that no fire, no fall, no failure can keep you down. The final flame. When you look back someday, you'll realize the fire that nearly destroyed you also defined you. It showed you what you're made of. It revealed who truly stood by you. It stripped away everything temporary so you could rise in authenticity, not illusion. So, rise again, not because life demands it, but because your soul was built for it. Your ashes are not your end. They're your beginning. You are not the one who was burned. You are the one who learned to rise. Chapter 11, Becoming the Flame. There comes a moment in every reborn soul's life when they realize they're no longer running from the fire. They are the fire. It's not the same destructive blaze that once burned everything to ashes. It's a steady, fierce light that warms, guides, and creates. It's the fire of purpose, refined by loss, shaped by lessons, and unstoppable in its glow. This chapter isn't about survival anymore. It's about becoming. About reaching that point where you stop asking, how do I make it through? And start saying, watch me build something from what tried to destroy me. 1. The moment you stop apologizing for your fire. There's a quiet shift that happens when you finally stop trying to dim your light for people who never wanted to see you shine. Maybe it happens at your lowest point, when you're exhausted from shrinking yourself to fit others' comfort zones. Or maybe it happens the day you realize that people who fear your strength will always try to make you doubt it. But the truth is, fire doesn't apologize for its heat. The sun doesn't ask permission to rise. Maya, a young architect from Istanbul, used to be afraid of speaking up. Every meeting, she would whisper her ideas, worried they'd be dismissed. She'd watch her male colleagues rephrase the same suggestions and get applauded. One day, her mentor told her quietly, if you want to build something that lasts, stop hiding behind silence. So she did. She began owning her voice. Slowly, boldly. The next time her ideas were questioned, she didn't shrink, she expanded. Years later, she led the design of a women's shelter complex, a masterpiece of resilience and hope. And when people asked her what changed, she smiled and said, I stopped trying to be liked. I started trying to be lit. 2. The fire is not meant to destroy you. There's a painful truth most people avoid. Growth hurts. Transformation burns. But that burn, it's not punishment. It's purification. Like gold in a furnace, your heart, your mind, and your spirit are refined in the heat of adversity. Every heartbreak, every failure, every rejection, it's not there to define your worth. It's there to reveal it. Think of Thomas Edison. Before he invented the light bulb, he failed more than 1,000 times. Journalists mocked him. Investors withdrew. Yet his response was pure fire. I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work. He didn't run from the heat. He became it. He turned the very thing that frustrated others into the fuel for his masterpiece. And that's the lesson for every dreamer. The fire inside you is not your enemy. It's your evolution in disguise. 3. The fire that creates worlds. Every great change in history began with one person who refused to cool down. Martin Luther King Jr., Malala Yousafzai, Nelson Mandela, they weren't superhuman. They were people who refused to let injustice extinguish their conviction. Malala, just a young girl from Pakistan, spoke out about girls' education knowing the risk. The bullets meant to silence her voice only amplified it. Her words traveled further than any gunshot could reach. That's what it means to become the flame. It's not about vengeance. It's about vision. You burn for something larger than yourself. The same fire that once consumed you now illuminates paths for others who walk in the dark. And you realize your suffering wasn't wasted. It became your spark. 4. When the fire becomes love. Somewhere along the journey, the flame inside you softens. It's no longer rage or rebellion. It's love, deep, unshakable love. Love for the people who doubted you because they made you stronger. Love for the pain because it taught you compassion. Love for the journey because it turned you into who you were meant to be. Elena, a mother who lost her son to cancer, started a small charity in his name. It began as grief therapy. She wanted to do something, anything, to keep his light alive. But over time, her fire grew into a foundation helping thousands of families afford treatment. At her first fundraising event, someone asked her, "How do you keep going after losing so much?" She looked up at the sky, tears glistening, and said, "I don't keep going despite the fire. I keep going because of it." That's the alchemy of becoming the flame. You transform pain into purpose. 5. The quiet fire of ordinary heroes. Not every flame roars. Some burn quietly, in classrooms, hospitals, kitchens, late-night studios, and empty offices. There's the teacher who stays after class to help the student everyone else gave up on. The father working 2 jobs to pay for his daughter's dreams. The nurse who smiles through exhaustion because she knows her warmth is someone else's hope. The artist who paints despite the noise of rejection. The janitor who hums songs at midnight because joy is a rebellion in itself. They don't seek applause or attention. But if you look closely, you'll see their light shaping the world. That's what true greatness looks like. Not fame, not titles, but a relentless heart that refuses to go cold. 6. The fire that outlives you. One day, long after you're gone, someone will pick up a piece of your light. A sentence you said, a gesture of kindness, a story you left behind. They'll carry it forward. And in that moment, you'll realize immortality isn't about living forever. It's about leaving something that does. When you become the flame, your impact outlasts your existence. You start to live with an inner knowing that every act of courage, every ounce of compassion, every battle fought with integrity, it all leaves a trail. A glowing path that others will follow when their own world grows dark. That's your legacy, not perfection, but illumination. 7. The final lesson. You were the fire all along. For so long, you searched for something outside yourself. A spark, a sign, a savior. You waited for permission to start, for validation to continue, for proof that you were enough. But here's the truth you finally uncover at the end of your journey. The fire was never out there. It was always you. Every time you refused to give up, even when your hands trembled. Every time you smiled through heartbreak. Every time you chose forgiveness over bitterness. Every time you loved despite fear. That was your flame keeping you alive. So now, when life tries to test you again, and it will, don't look for the light. Be it. 8. The world needs your fire. The world doesn't need more perfection. It needs more passion. It needs people who aren't afraid to stand in their truth, to love fiercely, to create loudly, to believe relentlessly. It needs you, because somewhere, someone is standing in the same darkness you once faced. And your fire might be the only thing bright enough to guide them through. So don't hide it. Don't tame it. Don't let the world convince you that your intensity is too much. The stars burn too, and no one tells them to dim down. Final words. When the ashes settle, when the battles are done, and the world grows silent, you'll stand there, breathing, shining alive. Not as the person who escaped the fire, but as the one who became it. And from your flame, new worlds will ignite. New hearts will awaken. New dreams will rise. Because this is what it means to be limitless. Not to be unscarred, but to burn and still choose to love. To fall and still choose to rise. To lose everything and still choose to give. That's not just living. That's becoming eternal. That's becoming the flame. Chapter 12. You are the fire. There comes a moment, quiet, sacred, and undeniable, when you stop searching for the spark. Because suddenly, you realize something almost unbelievable. You were the spark all along. All the books you read, the mentors you sought, the inspirations you chased, they were never giving you the fire. They were simply mirrors, reflecting the flame that had been inside you since the very beginning. This chapter isn't about motivation anymore. It's not about chasing, proving, or even surviving. It's about becoming. It's about standing tall in your truth, looking at everything you've been through and saying, I'm still here. I'm still burning. I am the fire. 1. The origin of the flame. Every fire has a story. Yours began the moment life tested you. The first heartbreak that cracked your chest open. The first failure that made you doubt your worth. The first betrayal that forced you to rebuild your faith from ashes. But that's how all great fires begin, with friction. There's no warmth without resistance. There's no light without pressure. And there's no strength without pain. The world told you that struggle was something to escape, that pain was something to avoid. But you've learned, pain is a sculptor. It carves away everything false until only your real power remains. You've walked through storms that could have broken you, and yet here you are, still glowing, still moving, still daring to love again. That's not luck. That's not coincidence. That's your flame refusing to die. 2. The fire doesn't need permission. For most of your life, you might have waited for permission. Permission to dream, to speak, to stand tall, to be bold. You waited for someone to say, it's your time. But here's the truth no one tells you. The fire doesn't ask for permission. The fire creates its own moment. The world belongs to those who stop waiting for approval and start moving with conviction. Look at history's brightest flames. Rosa Parks didn't wait for permission to sit. Steve Jobs didn't wait for a blueprint to innovate. Malala didn't wait for safety to speak. They simply decided that their voice mattered, that their passion was enough, and that their time was now. The same power that moved them is within you. You don't need the world's permission to rise. You only need your own. 3. Fire changes everything it touches. Here's what makes fire extraordinary. It transforms. Whatever it touches, it changes. Wood becomes warmth. Darkness becomes light. Doubt becomes energy. And that's what your inner fire does, too. It transforms the ordinary into the meaningful. When you approach life with fire in your heart, even the smallest act, helping a stranger, chasing an idea, forgiving someone who hurt you, becomes a spark that shifts the world. There's an invisible power in people who live with fire. They walk differently. They speak differently. They vibrate differently. Their presence alone ignites something in others. And maybe that's your mission, not to impress, not to compete, but simply to burn so brightly that others remember their own light. 2. The fire doesn't need permission. For most of your life, you might have waited for permission. Permission to dream, to speak, to stand tall, to be bold. You waited for someone to say, it's your time. But here's the truth no one tells you. The fire doesn't ask for permission. The fire creates its own moment. The world belongs to those who stop waiting for approval and start moving with conviction. Look at history's brightest flames. Rosa Parks didn't wait for permission to sit. Steve Jobs didn't wait for a blueprint to innovate. Malala didn't wait for safety to speak. They simply decided that their voice mattered, that their passion was enough, and that their time was now. The same power that moved them is within you. You don't need the world's permission to rise. You only need your own. 3. Fire changes everything it touches. Here's what makes fire extraordinary. It transforms. Whatever it touches, it changes. Wood becomes warmth. Darkness becomes light. Doubt becomes energy. And that's what your inner fire does, too. It transforms the ordinary into the meaningful. When you approach life with fire in your heart, even the smallest act, helping a stranger, chasing an idea, forgiving someone who hurt you, becomes a spark that shifts the world. There's an invisible power in people who live with fire. They walk differently. They speak differently. They vibrate differently. Their presence alone ignites something in others. 4. What the fire teaches you. Fire teaches in whispers and roars. It teaches that destruction can be creation, that endings are simply beginnings in disguise, that what breaks you also builds you. Think of the phoenix, a creature that burns, not to die, but to rise new. That's you. Every chapter of your life that went up in flames wasn't a failure. It was a rebirth. Every loss cleared space for growth. Every disappointment deepened your empathy. Every mistake taught you how to rise stronger. The fire has been your greatest teacher. It never punished why. 2. The fire doesn't need permission. For most of your life, you might have waited for permission. Permission to dream, to speak, to stand tall, to be bold. You waited for someone to say, it's your time. But here's the truth no one tells you. The fire doesn't ask for permission. The fire creates its own moment. The world belongs to those who stop waiting for approval and start moving with conviction. Look at history's brightest flames. Rosa Parks didn't wait for permission to sit. Steve Jobs didn't wait for a blueprint to innovate. Malala didn't wait for safety to speak. They simply decided that their voice mattered, that their passion was enough, and that their time was now. The same power that moved them is within you. You don't need the world's permission to rise. You only need your own. 3. Fire changes everything it touches. Here's what makes fire extraordinary. It transforms. Whatever it touches, it changes. Wood becomes warmth. Darkness becomes light. Doubt becomes energy. And that's what your inner fire does, too. It transforms the ordinary into the meaningful. When you approach life with fire in your heart, even the smallest act, helping a stranger, chasing an idea, forgiving someone who hurt you, becomes a spark that shifts the world. There's an invisible power in people who live with fire. They walk differently. They speak differently. They vibrate differently. Their presence alone ignites something in others. 4. What the fire teaches you. Fire teaches in whispers and roars. It teaches that destruction can be creation, that endings are simply beginnings in disguise, that what breaks you also builds you. Think of the phoenix, a creature that burns, not to die, but to rise new. That's you. Every chapter of your life that went up in flames wasn't a failure. It was a rebirth. Every loss cleared space for growth. Every disappointment deepened your empathy. Every mistake taught you how to rise stronger. The fire has been your greatest teacher. It never punished why. 7. The world needs your heat. There's someone right now, somewhere in the world, who's about to give up. Someone who believes their story is over, their dream is done, their worth is gone. And they need to see you. They need to feel your heat through your words, your kindness, your courage. Because when they see you shining despite the odds, something inside them whispers, if they can rise, maybe I can too. That's the beauty of being the fire. You don't just live your purpose. You ignite others. 8. The fire never ends. When your journey ends, and every journey does, the world won't remember how perfect you were. They'll remember how you made them feel. They'll remember your warmth, your spark, your light. They'll remember the way you kept going when everything said stop. That's what fire does. It keeps moving, spreading, transforming. Even when it looks like it's gone, its energy lingers in the air, unseen but alive. Your legacy will be the lives you touched, the hope you sparked, and the courage you inspired. You won't just be remembered, you'll be felt. 9. You are the fire. You always were. Every time you loved again after heartbreak, fire. Every time you stood up after failure, fire. Every time you spoke when your voice trembled, fire. Every time you dreamed when the world said it was too late, fire. You are not the ashes. You are not the scars. You are the living flame that refused to go out. So burn, beautifully, bravely, endlessly. Light up your world with kindness, courage, and conviction. Let your fire dance, let it roar, let it heal. Because somewhere, in your glow, someone will find their spark again. And that's how the fire lives on. Final words. No matter where life takes you, remember this. You don't find purpose, you ignite it. You don't wait for strength, you become it. You don't chase light, you are it. So when the nights grow long and the world feels cold, don't search for the flame. Close your eyes, breathe, and remember, you are the fire.